right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our DCN webinar series. So my name is Johanna Vihervara, and I will be your host for this session. So today we'll talk about the Cisco Tetration platform and hybrid cloud workload protection. And with us, we have from the DCN CU, we have Yossi Babakaran, product manager, giving the session for us. And then he'll be also answering the questions. So maybe those will be answered then more in the end, or we can maybe take something in between the session as well. And again, the audience is muted, so use the Q&A section. I can post the link. I'll post it in the chat section for where these materials will be posted afterwards. So it will be the deck and recording and Q&A. And yeah, without further ado, Yossi, whenever you're ready. So I guess we'll have first a presentation, and then Yossi will also have a demo.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So welcome to this DCN session on the Cisco Tetration platform, hybrid cloud workload protection. So from today's session standpoint, what we will be covering is the security features of Tetration platform itself. And we will be covering some of the features that have been already available, but we will be spending time on some of the new features that we announced a month and a half ago from the hybrid cloud workload protection standpoint, right? So that is the key intent of this presentation today. And as Johanna pointed out, use your Q&A panel. We will see if we can answer question and answers right away here, or we will take it offline and provide a response to you as well. So there is one more update that we will do as part towards the end of this presentation is the consumption or the deployment options for the customers that is available that we have expanded, right? And there are two more new deployment models that are available. So we will spend some time and we will talk about those as well. So let's get started. So if you look at the modern data centers, right? So the key questions that a lot of the customers or the key challenge that a lot of the customers face is how do I build a secure infrastructure for my applications? And the applications, as you know, or the data centers in an enterprise today is not a single environment anymore. Customers have on-prem data centers, they have public cloud presence, and in some cases actually multiple public clouds as well. And you have workloads running across these environments, and customers are struggling to secure these workloads to provide better infrastructure or for their applications and all that. So from if you look at that challenge, there are three aspects actually that drives the complexity of the challenge itself. The first and foremost, many customers don't know what is running in the environment, what applications they have, how these applications are communicating with each other, how they are grouped together, what are the infrastructure services that these applications are consuming, and which ones are communicating to entities that may be in the public cloud. So they don't have this understanding or ability to have this information. That is the lack of that knowledge is causing a lot of security problems. That's the first. The second aspect, if you look at it, even today, the predominant security designed for a data center is perimeter-based. So they won't, you have security instruments, either firewall and other appliances or other models built around the perimeter, but once you are inside the data center, you have a free lateral movement. So you can move from different zones, you have, any systems can communicate with anything else. That type of model doesn't work anymore, as we have seen with all the security incidents that have happened over the last few years. So customers have to get to the segmentation model. It can be micro-segmentation, it can be any segmentation. They need to implement segmentation within the data center and using a whitelist-based policy so that they can enable a zero trust model. So that is key. They have to do that, and that is they have to embark on that journey. The third aspect is how do I identify the behavior deviations or identify anomalies and suspicious things much more quickly, much more proactively? And then how do I reduce my attack surfaces by remediating vulnerabilities or known vulnerabilities that may exist in my environment because of certain software packages that I use? so that they can keep the infrastructure much more secure, right? So they don't have proper mechanisms to tie these things together in a real-time basis to reduce that attack surface. So these are the three challenges that customers face. So what we will do as we go through this presentation is we will see how Tetration enables them to address these things and enable a much secure infrastructure for the applications. So as you all know, with Tetration, the first and foremost is we enable customers to understand what's running in the data center using the telemetry that Tetration collects, right? The packet data that we collect or the packet metadata that we collect from servers as well as from the network infrastructure that enables the platform to understand what is running in the data center, right? And that we bring into the platform, analyze it at scale, use the algorithms to correlate things and all that. So that is key. And as you all know, we collect only information from the header. We don't collect anything from the payload. And for the security features that you are looking at right now, it is important for servers or for customers to have the software sensors on the servers because the amount of data that we can get and using that, the information that we can provide is very rich. So it is important, and the software sensors play a critical role in the security features from an infrastructure standpoint, right? So the visibility and forensics, so that is key. And the other thing is Tetration, we retain that information for long duration, so customers can go back and analyze it and use it for historical purposes too. The second type of information Tetration collects is the process data. So at the server level, what are the processes that's executed on the server itself, right? So who is running the process? When did it run? And what are the process parameters, including the process binary hash? Basically, this is like a process signature that you compute, and then you can use it for various purposes in order to identify, even you can identify if that process has any known bad behavior or not. So you can use the process information. That the process inventory is key. So if a process is executed on the server, Tetration has information about this. And the other thing the platform does, as you all know, is correlating the process to the traffic. So at any given point in time, Tetration platform can give information about which traffic was originated and originated on which server and by which process, actually, which process belongs, the traffic belongs to which process on the server. So you can correlate all the way up to the process, and that is key for not only for security but also for troubleshooting as well. And the third thing that Tetration does using this information is the enable application insight. So as you all know, Tetration builds that application dependency map based on this information. So it allows customers to understand how the application components are clustered together, how these application components are communicating with each other, which entity and what are the type of infrastructure services that this application or a particular application needs access to, and which communication is going through load balancer, which is not, how the users are accessing the application. So basically, Tetration builds that blueprint for the application. And the analogy that I use with customers is this blueprint is essential for security. Try creating a security plan for a building without a blueprint. So that is not possible at all, right? So that's the same approach. So you need this blueprint, and this blueprint plays as a fundamental capability in order to build that security functionalities on top, right? And not only that, Tetration also allows customers to keep this information up to date because all this mapping and everything is derived based on the telemetry data. So they can keep this information up to date as well. So this enables customers as a foundation level to understand what is running. So what do I have in my infrastructure, how these entities are communicating. So that visibility itself is great, which a lot of the customers do not have. So once you have that understanding, or once customers have that understanding, now they can start to build the security layers on top. application segmentation, or we call it application segmentation, but when you talk to a customer, they may have projects around, they may call it micro-segmentation. It doesn't matter what type of segmentation they are using. And it is critical to enable the segmentation using whitelist policy, because as you know, there are a number of entities, actually NSA as well as Australian defense side also. So there are, the primary security advice they give as you need to enable a whitelist based approach within the data center to build a secure infrastructure. So that is foundation. There is no question about that. You can you will have access to the slide deck, so you can look at these links, and these go back to 2016, 2015. So this is not, the concept itself is not new. And even from customer standpoint, they have been embarking on this microsegmentation journey over the years, but when you talk to them, you will find out that how little progress they have made. The reason is because nobody knows what that whitelist policy should be for the application. And customers even today struggle to, even if they have a whitelist version of a whitelist policy, they struggle to keep that whitelist policy up to date as the application behavior changes. So it is important for customers to understand that that whitelisting is key and segmentation is critical. And that with Tetration, actually, we can really enable them on the journey, because Tetration actually allows them to auto-generate the whitelist policy based on the blueprint. So that's the key factor here. So with Tetration platform, we have addressed the policy aspect in a very comprehensive way, as you all know. And using the blueprint of the applications that are generated, Tetration gives the recommendation of the whitelist policy. And the whitelist policy will say, for this application to work, these are all the only communication that you need to allow, with a series of allows and with a default deny in the end. And now, as a customer, I have that whitelist policy. As an application administrator or a security team, whoever is doing that segmentation, I know where to start with. And in addition to that, actually, with Tetration, it also gives the capability to bring in other corporate level policies and tie it into their whitelist policy using hierarchical models. Some of these things we will see in the demo, how it can be done. So if a security team has a higher level policies around compliance related applications, and this always happens, right? And customers, when they have certain set of applications where it has to be governed by a certain default rules, and it can be whitelist or it can be blacklist. So those can be inherited into that whitelist policy that Tetration generates, and it will seamlessly merge it together. So the administrators don't have to trust that whitelist policy blindly. They can take that whitelist policy and they can do a policy simulation on the platform. So they can really test the policy in order to see what traffic will be allowed, what will be dropped if that policy is enforced. So we will come to the enforcement mechanism, what are the different enforcement mechanisms customers can embark on and how it is important. So, but even before they enforce it, they can test the policy. And when they perform that what-if analysis of the policy, they can use historical data. They can select 2 weeks of data, 2 months of data, depending on the telemetry, how long they have been, they have the platform running. They can select the data and then they can run the simulation. And they can feel confident that when I enforce this policy, I will not be breaking my application. There is one more actually construct that we do allow and which I will show. If customers wants to start with a less restrictive option, little less restrictive option, and still track policy deviations, they can change the catch-all deny, the default deny to catch-all allow. Not block it in the beginning, but still start recording the events. So if the application starts to communicate outside of the policy, anything that hits the catch-all policy from Tetration standpoint is a policy violation. So that is also possible. So customers can we provide that flexibility so customers can implement that whitelist-based model in a safe and with a much more confident way, right? So that is the second aspect actually that Tetration brings in, the communication control using whitelisting. And once you have the policy, right, and this is how we generate the policy, and you all know that actually you might have seen this too. It generates the application dependency maps and the blueprints and the workspaces, and then you get the outcome is the policy, and you can use the software sensors and other different mechanisms in order to collect the telemetry for this purpose, and then use it, right? So I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. We'll go into the enforcement. So once the policy is available, the policy is there. Users can then choose to enforce that policy. And who has the enforcement capability can be governed through the role-based access control that Tetration provides. And when customers want to use the Tetration enforcement capability, then the policy is directly programmed on the operating system itself. Basically, the policy is pushed to the server's operating system, and we use operating system constructs like IP tables in the case of Linux and Windows Advanced Firewall in the case of Windows servers in order to enforce the policy, so that the policy is enforced right on the workload close to the application. And when you have that mechanism, basically a workload-based enforcement approach, then customers can realize segmentation irrespective of the infrastructure type. They may have workloads running in on-prem, doesn't matter what network infrastructure they have, and they may have workloads running in public cloud as well. So seamlessly across all this environment, actually, they can have a consistent policy enforcement. Not only that, they can also realize this enforcement across bare metal virtualized infrastructure as well as containers. So this is the key piece, right? So today I might be running a certain component of an application in a virtual machine, and 1 month later I might move it to a container. I may containerize it, and still I want to have the same policy mechanism. I don't want to be looking at a different model for policy enforcement. That is one of the key differentiation factor for Tetration. Yes, they don't, with very minimal overhead on the workloads, and irrespective of the infrastructure type, basically we provide a policy enforcement capability, and thereby enabling segmentation. And the segmentation basically contains the lateral movement. That is key. So even if they have a security incident that may come in, nobody can prevent the incidents. Incidents will happen. But the key thing is how quickly can you contain it, how quickly can you identify it, and how can you reduce your exposure. So those are the things that you can do from a data center standpoint. So with the segmentation, basically you are containing the lateral movement. So even if something happens, then you exactly know what it would communicate to, what is the scope going to be, and then you can take necessary actions. So that's why it is key to have the segmentation. So you don't have the free lateral movement anymore. You can contain the lateral movement, and then you can secure the infrastructure better. So once the policy is in place or the policy is enforced, then Tetration continuously tracks for policy compliance. So if any of the application components deviate from the policy, then Tetration can identify those policy deviations in almost near real time and then send an alerts on it. So these alerts can be integrated into customers' security incident and event management systems. So they may use Splunk for this matter. They may use IBM Curate, or they may use other systems as a SIM system. So Tetration can send those alerts to those platforms. So they know about it proactively, and then they can look into it. And if it is a legitimate deviation, they can take actions then and there, right? So it's very important. and they can whitelist it, they can update the whitelist policy, enforce the updated whitelist. All that can be done using the Tetration platform itself. So there is one more construct actually which Tetration provides, which is called as annotations or asset tagging. So with this, actually what Tetration provides is the ability to bring in attributes that define or that identify the workloads, like a server. What does it mean in a customer environment? It can be server A, it may be a VM, it may be in a production VM, maybe running a database. It is in this location. It may be used for certain application or a compliance-related application. So what that construct is for a server, what it means in the business context. So customers can bring in those attributes into Tetration. And most importantly, these attributes can be automatically brought into Tetration by using VMware vCenter integration, for example. If customers are using vCenter VM attributes that are available in vCenter or AWS tags, so Tetration can automatically query those and keep that tags also up to date, because we do that periodic sync in order to keep this information. And in the case of containers, for example, the same information comes from the Kubernetes or OpenShift. So that tags basically allows customers to abstract that policy information. So they don't have to use IP or those type of ephemeral attributes anymore. Rather, they can use these higher level metadata, and the IPs can change underneath it, but policy will be automatically up to date, right? Kept up to date by Tetration platform. For example, I may define a certain policy for my production workloads with compliance tags. Today, there may be 100 VMs that match that compliance-related aspects, and tomorrow I may spin up 10 more VMs actually that will meet the same criteria, and those 10 VMs will also inherit the same policy. And this elasticity is the automatic policy update based on this elasticity is something different, unique. Nobody else has this in the market today, right? And this completely eliminates for customers to understand the IP. They don't have to know the IP constructs. And Tetration in the back end normalizes, identifies, converts this into the network constructs, and then enforce the policy. Right. So this is a lot of customers like this model. They use actually this information can also come from CMDB, for example. If a customer has a CMDB and they want to feed this information from those systems, they can feed that from that too. So the policies can be defined using the higher level entities, and you will also see how we tie these to different new security functionalities like vulnerabilities as we go through this presentation. So once the policy is there, as we said, Tetration, with the Tetration enforcement, we can enforce the policy directly on the workloads. But customers can also consume the policy to enforce it using other mechanisms. That is, for example, from Tetration, we do publish the policy using our Kafka interface. So customers may say, I want Tetration to maintain that policy, but I want to enforce the policy using another mechanism. For example, even NSX, right? I want to take this policy into NSX, or I have other mechanisms. For example, I may have ACI. In the case of ACI, basically the policy enforcement, you have to consume the policy. You have to basically convert this into a coarse grain policy so that you can meet that hardware constructs and then enforce it into the ACI fabric too. Or I want to convert this into a firewall rule, and then I want to enforce it to the firewall. So customers can consume the policy in a multiple different way in order to enforce this, and thereby actually they can have the same policy being orchestrated across the infrastructure. So the whatever gets orchestrated in the workloads by Tetration is highly granular. So we whitelist every east-west traffic. It can be VM to VM. It can be even, for example, in the case of containers, it is even critical to enforce it at the container host because a lot of the traffic may not even leave the host how do you control in that manner, in that sense, right? So you need to control that. So that is highly granular, and the same policy can be consumed by other entities, but you don't need the same level of granularity at the other layers of enforcement because you may not see all the traffic there. For example, at the firewall level, if it is at the perimeter, you are predominantly, what you are going to see is the north-south traffic. So you can extract only that north-south traffic and then orchestrate it as a firewall rule. And you can take the same policy in the case of ACI, you have the fabric-based enforcement. But again, the TCAM and everything comes into play. So you need to be aware of that. So we have a prototype app actually that will show what the TCAM utilization is for that policy, which leaves will be the policy will be enforced on which leaves, how many TCAM entries it is going to consume, and it also, that app also gives the ability to adjust the policies, where you want to generalize it, where you want to keep that granular enforcement, and then you can do that, and then you can have the fabric level enforcement too. So thereby actually you have a multi-layer security within the infrastructure. So you are moving away from the single layer and security model or only the perimeter to a much more secure multi-layer model, which is critical for the customers. And the main thing is with Tetration, if the policy changes, Tetration publishes that updated policy over the same notification interface. So users or the systems doesn't have to constantly keep on pulling. So that mechanism is also available. So now that the key thing is we have done the segmentation. A lot of the customers, when you talk to them, and even in some cases, some of the competitors, they think that just the segmentation alone will provide a secure infrastructure for the data center. That is not the case. Segmentation is only one dimension of the security, one aspect of the security, right? So you have contained the communication. You have done that. And in a lot of the cases, actually, if you look at it, if there is a security incident, the network communication or the ability to move, trying to move laterally or trying to take the data out happens in the later phases of the attack. In the initial phases, actually, you will see different set of behaviors within the workload. And these may be like, for example, changes in the behavior of the process, what a process has been doing before and what it is doing now. For example, if you take WannaCry, that is a classic example where it did a privilege escalation of the known process running on a server, which is the Windows SMB process, and then taking doing a privilege escalation through that, and then doing a bunch of things before even communicating to the network layer. So you will network containing the lateral movement is one angle, but you need to look at other things. So that's where with Tetration, that's why what we say is the holistic workload protection, because we look at other behavior deviations on the workloads itself, on the servers itself. So let's start with the process. So everything, if you look at it on the workload, is what a workload does is governed by the process. What process is running on the server, and then so with Tetration, what we saw before was we have an accurate inventory of the process that's running on the server, but that's not sufficient. You need to then monitor the process for behavior changes. What is that process doing? And what it is doing, is it normal or is it suspicious? If it is suspicious, how can I tie these things together and say what exactly it did and how can I notify it proactively? Notify somebody proactively so that you can gain more insight into it, can take action to contain it and quarantine it if needed, right? So that is the key thing. And with Tetration, that is where what we are doing with the new features of the software. So what we are doing, if you look at it, is based on the process information that we collect from the servers. With Tetration, we try to identify those behavior deviations, right? And we compare that behavior deviations to the execution patterns of the malware itself. So what are the chain of events? For example, we are seeing, are we seeing a privilege escalation followed by side channel attacks or shell code execution or a random specific file access patterns, or even we track the user logon trails, right, or audit activities around that, meaning which users are trying to log into the servers. So we track that too. So it is important to track those behavior changes and then providing the flexibility to chain these things together and then define those event types. So let's look at it in more detail. So based on the process information that we collect, Tetration collects, it also gives you that process tree lineage, how the process was initiated. If it is a kernel process, actually you will see a different thread or a different process lineage. And if it is a user-executed process, you will see a slightly different lineage, but you can track all the way to the end to see how the process was initiated. And if it was started by a user, by logging into the shell, you will see those trail as well. So you have the full snapshot, and it is a time series view of the snapshot. So from the time the server booted up to until now, what were the process executed and in the order in which it was executed. And if a new process is executed, we have a trail of it and it joins the same process tree, right? And so you have the full, so the users have the full view of it. And using this, then we start to track the behavior deviations. So if a process is trying to do a privilege escalation, are we seeing shell code execution? Are we seeing side channel attacks? Side channel attacks are the ones where a process tries to access a memory or even the cache on the CPU without proper authorization. So you will start to see operating system signals around it. And Tetration actually sensor picks up those signals from the operating system. And it then correlates and it sends to the platform where it is all correlated to see what that behavior is. And using this behavior deviations, today we can even identify specter and meltdown. That is critical. So customers need to know if a specter type of incident is happening in my machine. And these type of incidents, if you look at specter and meltdown, these cache access and all these things happen first, even before the network communication happen. So these behavior changes will give customers the early indications of the compromise, right? What they need to be looking into. And most importantly, with Tetration, we provide the capability for customers to define events around it. There are certain out-of-the-box events, but customers can chain these things together. Let's say for a compliance environment where they have highly sensitive databases, they can create a separate event thread for that. They can say, if I see privilege escalation followed by access to these directories, then I need a critical alert on it. Or they can even put an alert just for the file access. If I see these set of files being accessed on the workloads by anything outside of a specific process, for example, if it is a database process and they have database threads that are running in there and only those should access the files and nothing else, and if they want to make sure nothing else touches the file, and if anything else, then they want an alert on it, they can do that. So they can set up alerts based on the file access patterns as well, and then receive notifications on it. They can say whether they want a notification alert or they want to just Tetration to record the incident, and they can get those events. So there are a number of these, or let's say another example, another classic example is the compromised user. So sometimes actually what happens, there is a compromised user account, and that could be exploited within the data center for gaining access. And if you have an information about that and you want to immediately set up alerts for it, you can do it. You can set up an alert and say, if I see this user ID being used to log into any of the servers, I want an immediate alert on it. So you can set up alerts on those user logons too. So with this process behavior, basically we identify multiple sets of these events, and we allow customers to chain these things together, and then link it to the behavior patterns of the malware, and then identify those events. Again, this is another dimension of the security, right? So this is, in addition to the lateral movement, now you are even being more proactive. So that is, which is good. And is that sufficient? I have done these two. I have contained the lateral movement. I now identify the behavior deviations and all that. Is that sufficient? No, it is not. You have another thing you need to do as well. You need to, first of all, make sure you are the software releases or the software versions that are running on the servers don't have any high or critical vulnerabilities in your environment. So that is important. So if you, there are interesting statistics behind it. So if you look at it, all the attacks that have happened so far have leveraged a known vulnerability that has been there for 6 months or more without being patched in the environment. So patching and keeping the the versions up to date is critical, but not all, a lot of the customers don't do that because they don't have the information about how these things are related together. From an application standpoint, how critical, how exposed is my workload for this vulnerability? Is it really critical for my environment or it is not? So they need to know about it. So that's the you take WannaCry. It exploited a known vulnerability with SMB process. You take Equifax hack. It exploited the Apache struts vulnerability, which is the most critical, which has a critical score of 10, right? The highest vulnerability score you can possibly have. Spectre and Meltdown, it's just a matter of time, basically, to have, and if the customers are not patched and have these CVEs, they need to think about it. It has not been exploited so far, but as you know, things will happen, right? So it is important. And what Gartner predicts is by 2020, 99% of the vulnerabilities exploited will continue to be known ones. And there is another statistics that is also there. By eliminating the vulnerabilities associated with the software, basically, customers can reduce their attack surface by 85%. Just by, imagine that. If a customer has set of servers and they know what vulnerabilities are there and they keep it up to date, then they reduce their attack surface by 85%. So that's the kind of impact the vulnerability things and these things have. So the reason is because all the time the attackers are looking for some way to get in, exploit something to gain more access, and then to take the data out. So it is important to keep this information up to date. So what do we do in Tetration to enable customers to seamlessly track these vulnerabilities and address it? So first of all, Tetration tracks all the software packages that are installed on the server. That is critical difference here. We take an inside-out approach, meaning the software sensors are running on the workload. It is monitoring the activity on the workload in real time and then communicating this information to the platform. So if somebody installs a software, installs a package on the server, they don't even run it, but they uninstall it after a couple of hours, we will still have a trail of it. So that is important. So we baseline or we identify all the software packages that are installed on the server. What version is running, who's the distributor, all that information is available. And then Tetration takes that information and then compares that to the known CVE database. So CVE is the common vulnerability and exposures database. So if you can go to NIST or you can go to MITRE. So these are basically the third parties that provide that database, known vulnerability database from different sources, provide that information. In the Tetration platform, in the current release, we have included 19 years worth of CVE information and going all the way back to 1999. So if a customer is running a software, that is, even if it may be older version, and if it has a CVE, we will flag it. So once the CVE is there, once the CVE, customers can use and tie these vulnerabilities to the policy. So that is another thing. We will see that in a couple of slides. To quarantine, to restrict communication, all that. It can be based on the vulnerability or the vulnerability score. So the important thing with the CVE is for every vulnerability, it gives a score. The score can be from 1 to 10, 1 being low, meaning you really may not have to worry about it. Anything between 1 and 3 is low. 3 to 5 is about medium, so you can, and 6 and 7 are considered high. 8 through 10 is critical. So anything more than 8, basically, customers have to think about patching it as soon as they get a fix for it. So the vulnerability score will also be shown in the Tetration UI. We will see all that in the demo, and customers can take action based on that. So if you look at the CVE information, right? So we identify all the software packages that are installed there, and then it gives the information about what the CVE is, and you can click on it. You can get information about it, how high it is, and how it can be exploited, all that information, and then you can take action. So, and not only that, actually, administrators can quickly find out all the servers in the inventory that has the same vulnerability. They can search based on the vulnerability ID, or they can search based on the package version, or they can based on the score, search based on the score. And then they can get immediately the list of servers that has the same vulnerability, and then they can put a patching plan in place in order to then remediate that vulnerability. So once that vulnerability is there, then users can define policies based on that. They can say if it can be one or more vulnerabilities, and if I have this vulnerability, I want to restrict communication through the policy. I can say I want to deny all communication to this host, and allow only these set of communication, so I can just patch it. So you can quarantine the server, or you can say this web-facing workload has a critical vulnerability. I cannot allow it to talk outside for now. I'm going to restrict the communication. Or the database server, I have a critical vulnerability here. I have to put a patching plan in place, otherwise I'm quarantining it. So you can take actions based on concrete actions based on this. And the most important thing is if you have just because it's defined based on the vulnerability score, today you might have 5 or 10 or even 100 machines that match that vulnerability, but if somebody installs the same version of the package with the vulnerability on a new server and it matches the vulnerability, it will be automatically included into that policy rule. So, and if somebody patches it and it no longer has the vulnerability, it will be removed from that policy set, and an appropriate policy based on the application will be pushed to it. So Tetration has those automations built in to the platform so that these type of actions doesn't need any manual intervention. So that is a critical difference with any other system. And the other thing is actually we tie all these 3 dimensions together from a workload perspective. That is another key difference. And when we talk to analysts or when we talk to that, they immediately get that difference. We do it in such a comprehensive fashion that most of the vendors tie it in either a single dimension or one of these they can do, but they can't do this comprehensive thing. So that is one of the key aspects. So with that, actually, let me go to the demo, and then we will come back to I'll just cover the new features from a demo standpoint, and then so that you can take a look at it, and then we will come to the consumption model because I want to spend about 5 minutes talking about the updated consumption model, and that is critical. So I will see if there are any. Yeah, I see about 10, 11 questions here. Okay, so I have important question about containers. So does it work? Does this work even with container endpoints, not just VM endpoints? I would assume you are referring to some of the vulnerabilities and the process-related events that you are talking about. So this does work with the containers as well. In the current release, we do identify all the packages that are installed on the container host. But there is a subtle difference today. We need to do enhancements here as we improve on the container capability. The main thing is today we don't baseline the packages that a container pod brings in. So whatever is there in the host actually is discovered. We track vulnerability for that, right? But there will be extensions of software enhancements to support the pod thing as well. So if some software component comes as part of the pod, we don't track that today in the containers, but that will be done. In the VMs, yes, bare metals, yes, absolutely, right? So since we are on the vulnerabilities topic, why don't we start from there? So in the server, if you are looking at a server profile, here you will see a tab called packages, and this will show all the software packages that are installed on the server. And if you look at it, and I can even search by the name. I can say name contains. For example, this is a server actually where we have installed the same version of the Apache struts that was used in the Equifax exploit. And to be precise, actually, this is the CVE that was exploited in the Equifax. As you can see, we give the score right here for them to know and for the user to know, and they can click on it to get the full details of this, how this can be exploited and all that. And we have the version information, what is the architecture, who's the publisher. So we have all that data that is available. Now you can take the same CVE and then you can go here and you can do a full inventory search. I can say, show me all the servers containing the same CVE. Right? So I'm searching for all the servers that has the same CVE. Now I have a concrete list of servers that I need to patch in order to remediate from that CVE. I can even search by kind of score. I can even say, show me CVE score, right? I can even, based on the CVE score, you can search also. So you can do all that. And you have the concrete list. You can even create filters based on this CVE IDs. For example, if I go here, so we do have that. So, for example, we have created a filter here. And you can say, I am interested in the CVE only for a certain application or certain scope or everything in my data center. So you can pick and choose which environment it is applicable to, and then you can create it as well. So you can create these filters. And the most important thing is actually you can use this within the policy. So I can say, if I have any server that meets this CVE, right, then I want to deny all communication and then allow only these communications for patching purposes and probably communication to Tetration to track this host, but I want to block everything else. So there are 4 machines actually that are 4 servers that meet that criteria today, and that will inherit this policy. And if, for example, tomorrow there is somebody installs the same struts version in a 5th machine, and it will also become part of this policy automatically. No manual intervention is needed. Or somebody patches the struts, so this CVE is no longer applicable, then automatically this will be removed from the membership, and appropriate policy will be pushed to it. So you can tie the CVE to the policy. So this is the key thing, and this can be done via API. This can be done via predefined policies too. So InfoSec can even predefine these policies. They can say, if any machine has a vulnerability score of 10 or 9, I am going to by default quarantine it. No matter what it is doing, I'm going to quarantine it. So they can even have a default policy like that. So that's the powerful aspect here. So now that we have the CVE thing, now we can also track the track the policy or the process aspect of it. For example, let's go to the service here. Let's look at the process snapshot. So the new enhancements that we have done is you will see another tab within the host profile, which is the process snapshot. So the process snapshot basically shows the entire process. I can play this in the order, so it will show all the process that were started in the order from the time the server was booted. And whatever you see here, these are all the kernel threads that were executed on the server. And these are all the user-initiated process or the system-started process after it was booted. And you can do the full hierarchy to it. You can build this tree. Of course, you can also get another view where you can start to track in a tabular fashion what is the process in details, process parameters, and all that information here. And using this baseline, inventory baseline, Tetration starts to track the deviations, right? So, for example, if a process, in this case, actually it is a shellcode execution, so you can see since the shellcode execution started, what are all the things that it started to do. So you have the full information about this. I can click on it. I can get the details about it. I can even replay it in a time fashion to see what exactly happened in that scenario, and I can get the full details of it. Most importantly, all this can be sent as alerts, so users don't have to constantly be looking at this information all the time. They can receive this in the form of alerts. So if you look here, you can see the full process details, why it is and what it is, and you can even play this information in the order it started to execute the things from the time this event happened, and we track all that. And when you have the alerts capability, you can go to the forensics config and you can start to set up alerts. So you will see some of the things that are already there. But for example, I can even either create a new one or edit an existing one, and I can say if I see a privilege escalation followed by file access, and if it starts to access, let's say, password file. If I see some process doing a privilege escalation and then accessing a password file, that is a red flag for me, and I want to send alerts on it. So as you can see, you can set up alerts, or you can chain all these different types of events together. You can track file access file name, you can track the process command line, you can track the execution path, you can track even the user that was used to log in and other actions like shellcode, privilege escalation. You can track all those things together. You can say, if I see a privilege escalation followed by side channel attack is a meltdown, or side channel attack Spectre, I can start to, I want an alert on it. So you can define these events together. So the side channel is, for example, sources meltdown. So you can create alerts on all these different type of things. As I said, including you can even track the user logon, usernames. Or if I start to see login failures on these machines, these set of machines, I want a critical alert because somebody is trying to access in a random fashion, probably. So I want to further deviate it. So these are kind of the things that you can proactively detect and identify. And if you want to tie the process to the policy, you can do that too via the API. So if I find out something anomalous and I want to push a policy, I can update the policy via the API and then take restrictive actions as well. So you have all that capability today using the Tetration platform. These are some of the new capabilities that are there. With that, let me go back to the slide because I want to spend some time on the new consumption models. New deployment options that are there. So as you all aware, right, so basically on the on-premise side, of course, we had the large form factor, the small form factor M. We had the Amazon AWS version. In the virtual appliance, one of the key things that we have done in the new release is we have given a software-only option, a ESXi-based virtual appliance that customers can deploy on their own hardware. The the system specifications are available in the data sheet, and you can also look at it in the deployment guides. Actually, we published the virtual appliance deployment guide, which has a procedure how you can deploy Tetration in this environment. So this is another consumption model that we have added, the software only, so customers don't have to purchase hardware appliance model. They can start with the software only option. It is suitable for smaller environment commercial customers where they have less than 1,000 servers. They can use software sensors, they can use ER-span sensors in order to collect the telemetry with the software only, and then they can stream the telemetry, and then of course the Tetration platform runs in a ESXi-based environment. So that is one option that we announced. The other option is Tetration software as a service option. So this is another critical consumption model that is important for customer. So if a customer wants to get started and they don't want to deploy anything in any Tetration component or run a Tetration platform in their environment, they can use software as a service option. All they need to do is deploy the software sensors. We will onboard them. They will be hosted on a Tetration platform that's fully managed and operated by Cisco. And it is suitable for customers, smaller customers who are ready to stream the data, who are customers who are SaaS only, and who consume all software as a service. And it gives a flexible pricing model. It can customers can start subscribing to it with as low as 100 workloads, right? So 100 workload license, minimum term is 1 year. They can subscribe to it, and they can land and expand. So they can start with 100, let's say after 3 months they see a real value in it and they want to expand to 500 or 1,000 servers, they can expand. Actually, with the software as a service today, we can scale for each customer, we can scale up to 25,000 servers. So it's even suitable for large environments where customers, if they want to consume software as a service, they are free to sign up here. So onboarding is very quick, and the customers can also realize the benefits of the platform very quickly. So these two models basically removes any remaining barrier to consumption of Tetration. So customers have a wide range of deployment options to choose from. And they can, if they are not ready to use software as a service, they can use a software only option. If they want to even start something to see the value, they can sign up for software as a service as long as they are ready to send the telemetry, right? So it's very quick. So today we have 1 year and 3 year terms available for the customers, so they can sign up and they can start benefiting from these two consumption models. So with that, I know we are at the top of the hour. So let me pause here, and of course, you know how to get to us. We have the entire PSS team supporting us as well, so you can reach out to them, or you can reach out to us when you have questions. If you need any help, feel free to reach out to us, and we are here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Yoti. I guess you can quickly just check if there's some question that you see is really important.
Okay.
We're at the top of the hour. I don't think we can answer all of these, but I'll send. These will be posted. The questions will be posted on the DCN website as well. So the ones we don't cover now, you will receive. I mean, you can go back and check. I'll have Yoti give an answer to these afterwards. But if there's some, Yoti, now you want to just quickly answer. If you see one of them would be very relevant.
Okay, I'm looking at the software sensor needs to run on ESXi host as well. Yeah. Actually, that is one interesting question. So are all the software sensor that is used for all the security features is the same software sensor that runs inside the VM. There is no need for customers to run anything in the hypervisor. That is one of the key advantages with Tetration, because we provide a hypervisor agnostic approach and even a cloud agnostic approach by running at the operating system level in the guest OS. So for all the functionalities that you saw is the same software sensor that runs at the guest OS and still at the same threshold, right? At 3%, within the same 3% threshold that we do all these functionalities, so they don't have to run anything in the hypervisor. There are a few more questions that are coming in. Let's take a note of these questions, Johanna, and then you can send it to me and Tim. We will answer these questions, and then we will give you the response as well, so you can post the question and the response with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll, it will, I can, the file can be saved, so we'll have these posted with the recording and deck. So you can take it's in the chat, there's the link where you can find all these materials. Give it a day or two. Okay, great. Thank you, Yosi, so much for presenting today and for our audience. So actually, this concludes our Q3 webinar series, so stay tuned. We'll soon send an email out with the Q4 program and schedule. So thank you all, and wish you all a good rest of the day.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.